Okay. Hi guys, my name's Adam Perlow. Today I'm here to talk about Zen protocol. This is a project we've been working on for a year now, and basically Zen is a decentralized peer-to-peer financial system. And before I go into the depths, I want to justify what's the rationale behind even doing such a thing. So if we think about the current system today, it's one where basically if I want to do business with you, I can't trust you because let's say, for example, I write an option to you where it says that if the price of some stock goes above a certain amount, I owe you money. So if I don't pay you, it's going to be very hard for you to do anything about it. You can take me to court, but it's going to be a headache. So what we do is rather than, let's say you trust me, we just have a situation where basically banks hold the money for us and we all do money, we don't do business against each other, we all do business with the banks. The bank is taking a position against me and you're taking a position against the bank, and me and you are never even doing business. The problem with this, that the banks are acting as intermediaries, is that, well, they limit who can access the system, and they limit the breadth of instruments that are in the system. If you think about, for example, entertainment, before you had YouTube, you had maybe 10 channels that were substantiated, and each channel had 10 shows, and you had 100 different TV shows. And if you wanted to see a new TV show, it was, you go talk to Warner Brothers. But then, once YouTube came around, and it was a free market, and anyone could create their own content, all of a sudden we discovered that there was space in the market for gadget reviews and cat videos and whatever it may be. And we're saying that same thing in the financial system, as you have more people being able to do business, not just the big banks, you'll have more commerce going on. So what we did is we went out and we built, it's a big word these days, but a blockchain specifically for that purpose of finance. Later on, we're going to have a panel where basically we will also be discussing what a blockchain is and is not well suited for, but we think that this is probably the right use case. And what are the advantages? What are the efficiencies gained here? Well, as we previously said, that in the conventional system, the reason that we basically the reason that we have to rely on trusted third parties is because we need to trust each other. What we do is we say you don't need to trust your counterparty, and because you don't need to, and the reason you don't need to trust them is because you can enforce their contractual obligations against them. So how do we create a system in which you can enforce a contractual obligation and therefore you don't need to trust your counterparty? We basically have three core components. One is you have tokens, two is contracts, and three are oracles. So tokens are basically decentralized assets. They can, they can represent, dollars, euros, stocks, commodities, whatever kind of instrument they may be. And the thing about our platform is we have support for multiple tokens. So this is a technical issue, but at the protocol layer, basically it's a lot easier for you to have different kinds of contracts, hold different kinds of tokens, and mix the tokens together in effective kinds of ways. For example, I can write a call option and cover my call with the underlying asset. The next component are the contracts. So contracts basically, well, they have a few capabilities. Number one, they're built out of code. And by building them out of code, basically we can have an agreement where we know that the agreement will do exactly what the code says. And what the contract basically does is they can hold tokens that were sent to it, or they can issue new tokens of its own thing, like its assets. And the third part are the oracles. Now what do the oracles basically do? Their role is that they take data from the external world, from the real world, and they put it in the blockchain. So in order for this whole thing to be useful, you basically have to be able to say, okay, this contract pays out money if Apple's above a certain price. And the oracle facilitates the mechanism by which we know what the price of Apple is. To just make this a bit more clear, let's say, for example, we have a call option on Apple with a strike of 150. So what that means is if Alice writes the call, then basically Bob's entitled to anything above 150. So we have Alice, Bob, and the oracle in this example. What Alice is going to do is she's going to basically type with code or whatever. We have a contract generator for her that makes it easy, but basically she creates a contract that says if Apple goes above $150 within, let's say, a month, and Bob's paying me the premium, then Bob's entitled to Apple's price minus $150. And once Bob reads this, he says, okay, that's agreeable to me. Please insert collateral to the contract. And by inserting this collateral into the contract, the contract's essentially acting as an escrow mechanism, and Bob knows that he'll get paid if he should. So Alice goes ahead and she sends $100 to the contract. Bob sees that, and then he safely can send $5, and then the contract will issue a call on Apple token. Let's say 2 weeks goes by, and Apple's is trading at $160, and then basically Bob wants to get his money out of the contract. But Alice doesn't want to pay him. So she's not going to basically do this, she's not going to make his life easy. So what does he do? Well, he goes and he's asked the Oracle, can you please provide me with a proof that Apple is worth $160? And the Oracle does that. And then what Bob is going to do is he's going to take together with the proof and the token that represents the call option, he's going to send that back to the call option contract. He's going to exercise his position and liquidate Alice's money forcefully. So the contract consumes those, no longer necessary, and basically spends the inputs and sends him $10. So people may ask, well, how is this like different than what Ethereum's doing? And I think it's two things. There's technical differences, but there's also the focus, the main issue here. So when Ethereum came along, it happened after basically you had a Bitcoin and colored coins and Mastercoin, and these were all things that had limitation. And it's my personal gut feeling that basically what happened there is there was this desire to have something that was flexible and can do everything. And what you resulted is seeing a system where what it achieved is basically the achievement of saying, well, we can do everything. But that doesn't mean necessarily because you can do everything, it's something that you actually want to do. What we're concerned is with actually real financial transactions, enabling like a specific target use case. And on the technical level, the way that Ethereum enabled everything to happen is by basically saying, listen, if you allow anything to occur, you could have an event in code, which basically the code creates an attack, an error in the system where basically the system gets clogged up. And in a decentralized mechanism, this is hard because when you have a personal server, you can just say, well, I'm going to ignore the code. But when it's decentralized, it's a much more complex to do that. So how did Ethereum solve the halting? It's called the halting problem. How did they do that? Well, they left Bitcoin's design, they threw it away, and they created this new thing, like a virtual machine, like an Amazon web server. And then they put this thing called gas into it, which counts every operation. And that happens. We took a different approach. We said, listen, we think that Bitcoin's design is well-grounded, and we can still gain that flexibility that Ethereum has from enabling any kind of contract to be created, basically any set of predicates you want on spending of tokens. And we can still avoid the halting problem, and the way that we do that is using these computational proofs, which we may get into later. So let's say that we can build this system, but there's some prerequisites in mind that we need to take into account before we actually think that that mainstream users will leave the old banking system and start to use our system. And what we think we need is a system that's secure, so people will know that if they start to use it, that they won't lose their money, because like the people who aren't here to gamble and they actually want to put their savings in this thing, they need to know that they won't lose money due to technical issues. It needs to be scalable. It needs to be cheap to use. It's not acceptable that it costs a few dollars to do a transaction. And it needs to be resilient. So what I mean by that is that people who are providing services to the platform, they need to know that that it's going to be around, and that they won't enter this stalemate where basically they can't decide what to do and the whole thing is problematic. And it also actually has to be useful, which is obviously a given. So dealing with security, how do we create a system which is secure and doesn't suffer from these vulnerabilities we've seen in the past? Well, we use a different computational paradigm than what may be thought usually, which is actually the classic Bitcoin model. It's called a UTXO model. It's basically you take transactions and you spend them. And what this provides is that each contract can be thought of as a sandbox. So rather than being a part of a big virtual machine, basically each contract can be thought of as its own tiny computer in a larger network. And these contracts are stateless, so what that basically means is that the contract can always be identified by its hash. It's stable, quote unquote, and if it does need to store state, it can do that on an output. It can also have its own transactions. So beyond the computational paradigm, the next thing we've dealt with is formal verification. So basically, what you want is you want a language that that, well, it's going to do what you think it's going to do. So to achieve this goal, we've based our language off of basically a subset of what Microsoft has, which Microsoft and INRIA developed this thing called F-star, which is a language focused on formal verification. And beyond making the code predictable, it also allows us to know ahead of time how much costs, how many operations a certain contract will take to execute. And it obviously allows you to prove the correctness of contracts. So for example, you could have a proof that says if Apple is indeed above $150, I'm going to get a payout from the contract equal to strike minus, asset minus strike. Another few nice things that we get out of the resource bounds, basically knowing how long it's going to take for the contract to terminate, is that we can get rid of gas and get rid of having a virtual machine. And also we can have compiled code rather than interpreted code. So what that means is that rather than basically everyone having to read off the code and then turn it into kind of code that the computer can understand and then execute the contract, we can just execute the contract, which results in it's a much faster and much more efficient. And also we don't have to count each step in the gas process. We don't have to increment the counter every operation. And this is obviously less work for miners. So if you think about decentralization as a function, or security as a function of like how much financial value is there for a given level of decentralization, and things like propagation time and validation time come into the mix here. So you can have more transactions going on because it's much faster to validate them. So you can basically, for a given level of security, you can secure more for cheaper, basically, is what it boils down to. So some other nice properties to make the thing scalable, excuse me, is our off-chain settlement. So basically what we're saying is, if me and you enter a contract, well, not everyone is concerned with that contract. It doesn't really matter. So long as me and you are willing to resolve the contractual arrangement amicably, then there's no need to basically make everyone aware of it. You only need to basically inform the whole network that this is a contract and that these are the terms. For example, as earlier, like a call on Apple, people are only interested in that once the contract is violated, and then the miners need to check, well, okay, is Adam or is Bob actually entitled to $10? So, and this is kind of akin to the way that in the real world, a lot of contracts are signed, but only a very small subset of them actually end up going to court. And this also obviously improves its privacy because people don't know about the contracts you enter until it becomes public, in the case of a dispute. The second thing we have is the active contract set. So what this mechanism does basically is it says, listen, so even once you take a contract and you put it on chain and you execute it there, it doesn't sit there forever. It doesn't just continue to consume space and be a burden on people. So we take contracts and we divide them into two. We have active contracts and we have inactive contracts. Now inactive contracts are basically contracts where only their hash is stored on the chain and miners are only aware of their hash. And active contracts are contracts that basically the miners store all the code of the contract. And these are contracts that can basically spend or create tokens. Now, the benefit of this is that, for example, for a contract to be in the active contract set, it needs to pay per block. So what this means is, let's say Alice defaulted on Bob, and Bob goes and activates the contract. Well, he pays for that contract to be active for 1 or 10 blocks or whatever the number may be, but he has to continue to pay for it. It's not like free forever. And this removes bloat, but it also is, I guess, where the Zen token comes in. So people say, well, why do you need a token? Everyone's trying to connect tokens to bad business models. And I kind of agree with that. And so what we've been saying is, well, we should only use Zen if it's actually necessary. So for example, if let's say you have Charlie and Dave and they're two miners, and Bob enters a deal with Charlie, then Bob is free to pay Charlie in whatever token he wants for activating that contract, for processing that transaction. But Dave, he also must like store and remember the contract after Charlie's basically included it into the set, into the active set. So how does Dave, who's not a party to the transaction between Bob and Charlie, how do we make sure that he's fairly compensated and that Bob and Charlie aren't actually the same person DDoSing the system? And that's what you actually need Zen for. You need to pay the rent fee for contracts to be in the active set. Another nice feature that we've had looking recently at what's been going on in Bitcoin is the whole thing of multi-hash mining. So if you guys are aware, obviously governance has been a big deal. Tesla's raised like $250 million off of that. And this is less governance, it's kind of a, I don't know how to say it, but at the end of the day, what we're saying is, listen, instead of having just one hash function be used to extend the blockchain, so basically what happens today is you take a random number, essentially, and you run it through a hash function until you find another number, and then if you find that number, then you get to win the Bitcoin block, right? And what we're saying is, we can use more than one hash function. We can have multiple hash functions. So in the example here, you have like SHA-2, which is like representative of Bitcoin, and let's say SHA-3, which is representative of whatever, something else. And what we're saying is right now, the target ratio is that 75% of the time, the blocks will be found by SHA-2, and 25% by SHA-3. But let's say now that the Bitcoin miners start to misbehave, well, then it's very easy to address that ratio such that they're immediately penalized. And what this means is they immediately become less profitable, and they become less profitable without any risk to the people who hold coins. And this incentivizes all the miners to behave correctly and to actually act in the best interest of their users, because they can always easily be fired, rather than result in a situation where basically it's like you either live with us or you die with us. And it results in better decentralization and other things of that manner. Another interesting concept I want to touch on, because I think we're the only people who actually do this efficiently, is have access to real-world data. Because in my personal opinion, having these smart contracts without having the data available from the real world is worthless. And the mechanism, well, number one, it's decentralized, so anyone can be an oracle. And number two, it's efficient. So let's say if you have, let's say, 20,000 stock tickers, you need to be able to commit to all of them without spamming the chain. And how we do that is by including in our wallet software, where basically we connect to APIs from Google, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, wherever, and we put data into a tree. We sort it into basically a binary tree, and then we take the hashes and we create a Merkel root of that tree. And the miners are committing to the Merkel root. So every block, basically the miners update their table, and then they create a new Merkel root and they commit to that Merkel root. And what this means is that the miner, even though maybe people know what the prices the miner committed to are, they don't know the secret by which they can prove it. So that means that if Bob wants to use this proof in order to basically make Alice pay him his money, then he needs to pay, let's say, or the oracle, whatever, $1. Another property that we have is, I guess this is positioning, is rather than competing as another money, as another coin, we're saying, well, we actually want to integrate with the current decentralized money. So we have Bitcoin, which is like a decentralized gold, however you want to look at it. And we're saying, okay, that's nice. There's certain things it can't do. And not only can it not do, it shouldn't do. It shouldn't try to be everything to everyone. It should just be very good money. And finance, we can help it with. And how do we do this? Every Zen block, miners commit to the Bitcoin UTX. Basically, miners observe the Bitcoin network, and they commit to it. And the result of that is that basically you can have contracts in Zen operate on Bitcoin. So for example, when Alice sold a contract to Bob, Alice could say, pay me Bitcoins to this address, and Bob could prove that he did in fact pay Bitcoins to a certain address that Alice specified, and based on that, prove to the contract that he's entitled to the upside. What have we built till today? So right now we've been working on this for a year, and we have basically a test net. going on. You can see, whatever, we have some contracts, so you can see, the type they are, on what underlying, the strike price. Maturity is notated in blocks because days is kind of difficult. And the thing is basically working. A bit, room for improvement, but working. And we have interfaces for easily creating call options and put options and whatever. And you can see that here, and you can see the F-star code that we're using. We're a team, me, Nathan, Sharon, Eleanor, Ilan, Doron, and Ash. We're going to do our sale on, I guess, August 15th. Yeah, we're going to do a token sale to finance future development. And if you would like to help us with testing the beta software, please send us an email. That's it. Questions? And I'd like to invite the rest of the people to the panel.